Welcome to the 21st broadcast of the T-Roh Show. It's your host, Keith. I got John with me.
Good morning, folks.
All righty. So what we're going to do is talk about this classification as a sovereign citizen, but we're going to go into a much deeper part of it. So people see the idea, see what is really going on with it when somebody is called a sovereign citizen. Now, the first thing that most people say, well, there's no such thing as a sovereign citizen. A citizen can't be sovereign, blah, blah, blah. It's a dichotomy in terms and all these other things they start going on off with. However, that doesn't solve the problem to go that way, to even talk about it. Now, when we were back in, it was 2010, and then around 2012, we redid the Articles of Confederation. We claimed them, waited 6 months. Nobody objected after we'd published it, and we said, okay, we'll just go ahead and redo this here. Now, that's an awful weird jump. Why would you go from there, from being considered a U.S. citizen, to revamping the old Constitution? Well, we're going to show you why tonight. So what we're going to say here is this. When we first did this, and it was after the 6 months, we were working on a naturalization thing. And we went around to how many states, John? 2 or 3?
But it was just four states, I think it was, we went to.
Okay. And asked them, can we take an oath to the state? And they said no, right?
Yep. In fact, we asked the clerk at the county level if they had a form we could fill out, or had a judge or somebody we could stand in front of and take our oath, and they said no. At that time, I went ahead and went on up to the state, Tallahassee up there, and asked them the same 2 questions and got the same answer, no on both counts. So from there, I went on up into Washington, D.C., to Secretary of State of the United States, and asked them up there, and they said no form, and no, there's no one you can stand in front of to take an oath to the country.
To the United States.
To the United States, that's right.
Okay, so you could not become a citizen. Actually, you could not become a legal citizen of the country. That everybody looks at the country as being the United States. We're going to speak in everybody's normal everyday language here. Everything is translation that we're talking about. We're talking to the people that that believe they are U.S. citizens and the whole deal. Okay? That's who we're talking about tonight. That's why I said this is going to be a little bit different. We tried to take an oath to the United States as a citizen of the United States. They would not let us. There's no freaking provisions whatsoever. This was before we did this, okay? We went to the United States of America. Figured out we were first in time, first in right, and the whole thing. But what we're saying is that we tried to do that. We tried to become citizens of those states. They wouldn't let us. They wouldn't allow it whatsoever. So here you are. You're in what you're thinking is your country. You can't even take an oath to your country that you think you're a part of. So what are you left with? You're stateless. You got nothing. Except around tax time. All of a sudden, you're important. And then you find out that your vote really doesn't matter, because it's the Electoral College that actually votes in a president and all that anyways. So if you can't take an oath to the country, what are you going to do? Literally try to do this. That's not a made-up story.
No, it is not.
We went and actually did that before we even started this. They said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, before we do this, let's give them a chance and see if we can even become citizens of the United States or nationals. And then you have all these groups coming in and saying, well, you got to fill out this form. If you want to be a national, you can do this and blah, blah, blah. Or you can turn the passport into something else. And it's not true. None of it's true. You have a lot of groups out there that are trying to do all these different things when all they had to do was go ask. Do you guys mind if I take an oath to get to the United States? Well, yes, they do. They take an oath. And then you have people coming in from the federal side and then the state side and local side that are saying, you're subject to these laws. Well, if I don't have an oath to the United States and I'm not a citizen of the United States, how am I subject to that? That's a valid question. That's a valid legal question, by the way. If people think that they don't have to do it or they don't have to take an oath, just hold on a second. And we'll make sure that that you see the proof. Okay, this is a 1906 naturalization uh, statute that they wrote. Okay, Declaration of Intention,
Yeah,
qualifications, and all that.
that's showing good too, Keith.
All right. Now it says here, this is dealing with their naturalization being enacted, blah blah blah. Designation of Bureau of Immigration, Department of Commerce, and they say, well, I'm not coming from a different country, so immigration doesn't apply to me. Well, hold on. Says that exclusive jurisdiction to naturalize aliens as citizens of the United States is hereby conferred upon the following specified courts. So the United States Circuit and District Courts now existing, or which may hereafter be established by Congress in any state. Right here, see that? It's any state. Okay, that's United States District Courts for the territories of Arizona, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Hawaii, and Alaska, the Supreme Court of the District of Columbia, and the United States Courts for the Indian Territory. Also, all courts of record in any state or territory now existing, or which may hereafter be created, having a seal, a clerk, a jurisdiction in actions at law or equity, or law and equity, in which the amount of controversy is unlimited, that the naturalization jurisdiction of all courts herein specified, the state, territorial, and federal, shall extend only to aliens resident within the respective judicial districts of such courts. Okie dokie. Now, the courts herein specified shall, upon requisition of the clerks of such courts, be furnished from time to time by the Bureau of Immigration and Naturalization with such blank forms as may be required to the naturalization of aliens, and all certificates of naturalization shall be consecutively numbered and printed in safety paper furnished by the said Bureau, that an alien may be admitted to become a citizen of the United States in the following manner and not otherwise. This is the only other way. Okay, so first, he shall declare an oath before the clerk of any court authorized by this act to naturalize aliens, or his authorized deputy, in the district in which such aliens resides, 2 years at least prior to his admission, and after he has reached the age of 18 years, that is, the bona fide his intention to become a citizen of the United States, and to renounce forever all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, and particularly by name to the prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty for which the alien may be, at the time, a citizen or subject. And they'll say, well, this doesn't apply if you were born here. Actually, in a way, it does. Because when they're talking about it, they're saying, well, these hereafter established by Congress in any state. Okay? So this is what we were asking. Is there any way that we can take an oath? Is there any place we can do that before we go any further? And they all said no. There's no such thing. We went to a clerk, no such thing. However, this is like dealing with a bipolar, somebody who's bipolar. What I mean by this is they're saying, no, you can't take an oath to be a citizen of the United States. We don't want you. Oh, but you're subject to our laws. We don't want you as a citizen of the United States. But you are subject to our laws. Back and forth, back and forth. What do you mean subject to your laws? Does that mean somebody in, because if I'm an alien, and does that mean somebody in Mexico that they're subject to your laws? No. So what's the difference? There is no difference. Oh, you were born here. So? So I was born here. Big deal. That doesn't mean I'm a citizen. I haven't taken an oath. I don't live in one of your judicial districts. So if I'm not a citizen of the United States and you won't let me take an oath, how can you call me a sovereign citizen when I'm not a citizen at all? You won't let me take an oath. You shun me. No, we don't want you. It's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple way of looking at things. Okay, here's the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. This is a thesis on the sovereign citizen movement, an empirical study on the rise in activity, explanations of growth, and policy prescriptions. 107 pages of bitching about people they don't want, trying to get them to leave those people alone that they don't want. You don't want them. You don't want to be in contract with them, but you won't leave them alone either. You make fun of them on websites like fogbo.com. You make fun of them all the time. You trash them. You do this or that, and you won't leave them alone. And then when they try something to try to defend themselves, when they're sitting there all alone, you didn't want them in the first place, but you screw with them. They try to defend themselves. They're the terrorist. They're the ones that are being aggressive. You don't want to follow our laws. What do you mean you don't want to follow your laws? You won't even let me be a citizen. So you want me to take all the obligations with no benefits of those obligations whatsoever. That's somebody who's bipolar. The United States faces a domestic threat that is largely ignored by counterterrorism practitioners and policy. The sovereign citizen movement, the adherents of this anti-government movement. What do you mean anti-government? You won't let them take an oath. How can they be anti-government? You won't even let them be a part of it. So you shun them and then call them anti-government and trash on them. Have committed violent, even terroristic acts and employed paper terrorism tactics. What do you mean paper terrorism tactics? You won't let them become a citizen. The group clogs courts and harass government officials, but a paucity of hard data on the sovereigns has stymied any concerted or ununified response. So we're going to go to war with them. You mean go to war with them? You won't let them be citizens. You won't let them take an oath. You completely shun them. And then you dogpile on them. Law enforcement officials have yet to determine how many sovereigns are inactive in the United States, where they are concentrated, and whether the movement is gaining adherents. This thesis addresses the dearth of information on sovereign citizens movement. And by the way, what they're saying is sovereign citizens, they're calling domestic terrorists. So let's dogpile on them again. Let's not let them take an oath. Let's not let them become a citizen whatsoever. And then call them terrorists and mark them for murder. Because that's exactly what you're doing. Because anybody who's classified as a domestic terrorist can be shot on sight. Anybody that has this on any records, that they're using those records, they're not even citizens, and they keep records on them, and then they classify them, they profile them, which is illegal as hell, profiling somebody. You profile them, You've worked your way into profiling. That's okay to get past all that, all the illegalities on that. And then when they get pulled over, you got 15 cops that are ready to shoot them. That's exactly what happens. We're going to shoot this son bitch. He's anti-government, but you won't let him become a citizen. None whatsoever. You won't let him become a citizen so that they can get some of the benefits of being a citizen and the obligations that go with it. Okay, so in other words, you're not giving them any rights because you're not allowing them to have any obligations. That's in the law of nations, by the way. You won't let them have any obligations so they can have rights, and then you dogpile on them and call them freaking terrorists. Now, I agree. Some of the stories in here, yeah, stupid stuff that people do. I agree with that. But you're dealing with ignorant people that you have to teach. And we've taught many and been very successful at it at our own expense without any federal funding whatsoever. Federal agents get paid to do what they do. They get paid to dogpile on people all day long. But people within the government of the United States of America mainly volunteer. They don't get paid to do it. But we've solved a lot of problems. Solved way more problems than what the United States has caused, or what the United States has solved. They're causing the problem because they're shunning people constantly, trying to get them to get obligations. And just because, and then you force association on them. And when you force association, you violate human rights. But that doesn't matter, right? Because you have nukes. As long as you have nukes, it's okay to do everything that you're doing. However, it goes on and on. Actually, this is 50 something pages because every other page is left blank. Then they have a history and all that. And there was a group, they talk about the history of this posse comitatus group that was created in 1972 and then forced association on that. Nobody even knows what the hell that is, what this posse comitatus group is from 1972. Nobody today has any clue what that is. And some people just talking have been labeled this sovereign citizen thing just because they said certain things. That's what's going on in America. Let's just say what's going on in the United States. Then they have the sovereign citizen growth chart and all this other kind of stuff. Then they have the more movement in here, which, we're not saying that any of these people are right. Believe me. However, the way that they're doing it is absolutely abusive, extremely abusive towards people. Because you're not trying to help them. You're just dogpiling on them. That's all you're doing. You got a lot of might. How dare they question us? We're all that in a bag of chips. Your ego gets inflated. Chest gets pumped out. Don't you screw with us. We'll put you in the ground. Now, we've seen people do that. We've seen a lot of agents do that. They think they're protecting something. But what if one thing was true? What if those agents didn't have what they thought they had? We're going to show you absolute proof of that. What if those agents didn't realize that they weren't citizens of the United States either? You can take an oath to their office and all that. That doesn't mean squat because you actually didn't qualify. Because you have to be a citizen of the United States to even take that oath. What if we were to tell you that your chain of title is all messed up? It has been since its inception. There's a little thing called law of nations. Now, if you don't believe that the United States knows what the law of nations is, we can go right over to their Constitution. It's right here. Law of nations. To define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas, the offenses against the law of nations. Has anybody ever seen them write any legislation on offenses against the law of nations? We've had people that do research for years. Basically, their whole basement's full of paperwork and books and crap. all over the place. And they spend years studying Title 26, and they spend years doing this, that, and the other thing, trying to find some kind of remedy. And it's amazing to watch. If this is in that Constitution, their Constitution, it's called the Law of Nations right here. Okay, if you don't believe me, let's go on up and say, oh, Constitution of the United States. There it is. And there's the Law of Nations. Okay, so believe it or not, folks, people believe that the Constitution of the United States, because they've been told this a million times, that the Constitution is the law of the land. Actually, it's not. The law of the land is the law of nations. That's a book that nobody reads. There's not a judge that I've ever heard of. If I said, have you ever read the law of nations? They'll ask me, what is that? I've asked an attorney over in, attorney, lawyer, whatever you want to call him, over in Missouri, have you guys read the law of nations, or do you know anything about international law? No, we don't study that. We don't study international law. We don't know what the law of nations is. All we studied is state statutes and everything else. So we say, okay, well then, believe it or not, the law of nations is the law of the land. It was derived from the Bible, and it is a nation building book. So if you have a judge or a lawyer that has never read the law of nations, do they qualify to be a judge or a lawyer? No, absolutely not, because they've never read the law of the land, and they wouldn't know the difference. So you're dealing with people that are simply ignorant. And ignorance, folks, is extremely dangerous, especially with people that have guns. Extremely dangerous on both sides. Now, here we go. What are you missing? If you go over to the Law of Nations, I'm going to show you what you're missing. Okay, this is the book. Is it switching, guys?
Looking good.
Okay, everything's switching. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to read it out. What is the end of society? Now, that is not what it means. What do you think it means? Okay, so the end or object of civil society is to procure for the citizens whatever they stand in need of, for the necessities and conveniences in accommodation of life, and in general, whatever constitutes happiness. With a peaceful possession of property. Oh, no. We can't have a peaceful possession of property, because that's what? Oh, that's an enemy of the socialist system, right?
Yep.
If you believe in private property rights, oh, holy crap, man, you can't do that. You're a right-winger freaking Nazi. All right?
Yep. Enemy of the state.
But that, folks, is the law of the land. You can't get away from that. A method of obtaining justice. Well, that's kind of hard to obtain today. With security. And finally, a mutual defense against all external violence. Well, as of right now, the violence is coming from within. Because why? Because you have a bunch of ignorant people. It is now easy to form a just idea of the perfection of a state or nation. Everything in it must conspire to promote the ends we have pointed out. In the act of association, by virtue of which a multitude of men form together a state or nation. Oh, are you telling me that we have to have an act of association in order to form together a state or nation? Right there. How many people tell you, well, the state said this? Well, no, the state doesn't say shit, because you have to have an act of association before you form that state. Each individual has entered into engagements with all to promote the general welfare, and all have entered into engagements with each individual to facilitate for him the means of supplying his necessities and to protect and defend him. That's not in a constitution, guys. That's not in a constitution, folks. That's before the Constitution. You see where the Constitution is not the law of the land and is actually the law of nations that is the law of the land? It says, for the means of supplying his necessities to protect and defend him. It is manifest that these reciprocal engagements can no otherwise be fulfilled by maintaining the political association. The entire nation is then obliged to maintain that association. The entire nation is obliged to maintain that association. The freaking entire nation has to do that. And as their preservation depends on it, continuance, it thence follows that every nation is obliged to perform the duty of self-preservation. This obligation, so natural to each individual of God's creation, is not derived to nations immediately from nature, but from the agreement by which civil society is formed. It is therefore not absolute, but conditional. That is to say, it supposes a human act, to wit, the social compact. Now, I got a question for every federal agent and every state agent, local agent out there. Did you guys ever sign a social compact? Is there a social compact that you're maintaining? Did anybody ever sign it? This is the law of the land. You're saying that people don't want to go by the law, but yet you don't have a social compact. If you do not have a social compact, you never formed a civil society, and you're not a part of it. So what in the hell are you doing?
Without a social compact, how can they claim to even write a law?
Without a social compact, they haven't even formed a state.
That's right. Therefore, they can't write a law.
Now, even if you had a social compact, and as compacts may be dissolved by common consent of the parties, if the individuals that compose a nation should unanimously agree to break that link that binds them, it would be lawful for them to do so, and thus to destroy the state or nation. But they would doubtless incur a degree of guilt if they took this step without just and weighty reasons. So what we're saying is here. It says, for civil societies are approved by the law of nature, which recommends them to mankind as the true means of supplying all their wants and effectually advancing towards their own perfection. You have to have a social compact. If you don't have one, you don't have a society. If you don't have a society, you don't have a state. So what does that tell you? That tells you the United States, without a social compact, does not exist. It cannot exist even legally on paper, and neither can any of the states. And with your arrogance and vanity, you're walking around as if you know it all, and that you have decided that somebody has broken the law and offended us in your arrogance and vanity. Not even you yourself have a social compact. You never signed one. So do you have police powers? No. Not according to the law of the land. You do not. Now people will say, well, that's in the law of nations. That was old stuff. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go over to your Constitution. It's right there. Law of nations. You know, folks, you know why they have never written any offenses against the law of nations? It's because not one politician today has ever read it. They don't even know it exists. They have no idea. You know why lawyers just pass laws based on emotion? It's because they never read the law of nations. They don't know what they can do and what they can't do. They just do what they think is popular. They just feed the vanity. That's all they're doing. They're an embarrassment to a civil society. They would be called lawless to a civil society. Now, a lot of people don't like to be a 14th Amendment citizen. Okay? Well, that's easy enough. Social compact. No social compact. Okay, here's your social compact. Let's go over to the 14th Amendment. Okay, here's a copy of the 14th Amendment, Section 1. This has been a big thing. Everybody's been arguing about this for years. We're going to explain this to you, what this is. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. There has been the biggest argument on the planet as to and subject to the jurisdiction thereof forever. Okay? Isn't that correct, John? You've heard this over and over again. And subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And they come up with all
Yep,
these things.
that's right.
And subject to the jurisdiction thereof. But I'm not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Well, in a way, they're right. Matter of fact, everyone is correct. No one's subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Now, how do you become subject to the jurisdiction thereof? Oh, I'm sorry, we just talked about that. It's very easy to figure out. Very easy, because they should have gone to the law of nations. They don't have a social compact. The social compact is what makes them subject to it. Just like the social compact that all the general postmasters sign makes them subject to what? Oh, the government of the United States of America. It's voluntary. It's a social compact that created that society. We even have a social compact for American nationals and residents that makes them subject to the jurisdiction of the United States of America. Not the government of the United States of America, to the United States of America within their respective states. They have to have the social compact. If there's no social compact, you don't have shit. You've got squat. So people around the world have been treatying with a country that does not have a permanent population, which means it doesn't qualify as a country. It has to have a permanent population. A permanent population are those people that have signed a social compact and then have raised their right hand, put their left hand on the Bible, and took their oath to the United States, that country. That doesn't exist. Nobody has offered a social compact with anyone. Folks, social security number is not a social compact. That has nothing to do with being a citizen of anything. That is not a social compact, because what is in there in that social compact? Well, it tells you right here. The entire nation is obliged to maintain that association, and as their preservation depends on it, on its continuance, it thence follows that every nation is obliged to perform the duty of self-preservation. It is there, by virtue of which multitude of men form together a state or nation, each individual has entered into engagements with all for welfare. Well, that's not a social security administration. That's not a social compact, because there's nothing in there that promotes the general welfare. That's a Ponzi scheme. That thing is based on what we call blue sky. You're just hoping that the next generation keeps paying into it so you can get your social security at 65. That's all that is. That's not a social compact. It has to say social compact on it, on the document, social compact. If you don't have one, you don't have squat. Well, I took an oath to uphold the laws of the state. Great. You don't have a state because you don't have a social compact. You never did have a state. There is no social compact. It has nothing to do with religion or anything else. It's just there's no social compact. We're going to show you what a social compact looks like. Okay, this is the social compact right here. It's a bilateral social compact agreement by and between the people for the United States of America. Now, this is what it reads. The people agree that the great and essential principles of liberty and freedom are recognized and established within the United States of America. The essential rights and liberty for the people within the metes and bounds and seaward boundaries of the United States of America, within their respective states of the Union, are hereby accepted and acknowledged with this bilateral social compact agreement in and for a republic form of government within separate spheres in perpetual union. Holy crap. That makes sense, doesn't it? They agree to that. So now we all agreed on something. Article 1, the people agree that all people for the United States of America, when they form a social compact, are equal. Now we don't have to go through this whole thing of women have rights and these people have rights and all this other kind of crap, because the social compact makes sure that happens before you form any kind of state. You have to have this in place first. If you don't have this in place, you don't have shit. Nothing. You have zero standing in law anywhere in the world, and have certain inherent and defeasible immunities from other independent states of the Union, among which are those enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property and reputation, and of pursuing their own happiness. The people agree that all political power is inherent in the people for the United States of America, and all republics are founded on the authority of the people, and established for the benefit and general welfare of the people that form said republic. And therefore the people have at all times an unalienable and defeasible right to alter or abolish government in such manner as they deem expedient. Okay? Now, a Declaration of Independence is not a social compact, just so everybody knows, because I know that's going to come up. They're all going to come up with it. That's not a social compact. A political party, not a social compact. A political, what do you call it? A political party with a political platform, not a social compact. That's not what that is. This is outside of any political thing. The people agree that all people have a natural and unalienable right to worship in accordance to their own conscience and according to the dictates of their own conscience, and that no preference shall ever be given by law to any religious establishment or mode of worship in any republic form of government within the states of the Union of the United States of America. Pretty simple. We all agreed on that. Okay, when people do resident declarations, they end up coming over here and they sign their social compact, which gives them the authority through the law of nations, the law of the land, to form their national governments within their states. They have to do this, not according to the dictates of any one man. It is according to the law of nations, which formed the United States of America in the first place. And we've even proven this with others. When they went and tried to start another state, I think it was within Massachusetts, there was a social compact that everybody was a part of before they formed that state. This was common knowledge back in the 17 and 1800s. Common knowledge, folks. This is something that everybody knew, just the same as everybody knows about Facebook today. Everybody knew this stuff. This was easy. The people agree that all elections shall be free and equal within each body politic, formed as derived from this bilateral social compact, and no property qualification is required for eligibility to office. This means you don't have to be rich, okay? In other words, if you're broke, you can still qualify. And for the right of suffrage shall not be required within the republic form of government within the states of the Union within the United States of America. The people agree that within, as signatories of this bilateral social compact agreement, may freely speak, write, and publish sentiments on all subjects, being responsible for the abuse of that liberty, and no law shall ever be passed to curtail, abridge, or restrain the liberty of speech or the press. Okay? Now, if we had a social compact, if we all did, then stuff like this wouldn't be happening. Here's the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which all these agents don't have a social compact, and none of them are citizens of the United States because they never signed a social compact, and therefore they never had the authority to sign one, or since they didn't sign one, they never had the authority to raise their hand and take their oath to the Constitution. They don't take an oath to they don't take an oath to the country. They take an oath to the Constitution. If you pledge allegiance to a flag, that's not the country. So it has no standing in law. Okay, and they call it an extremist movement, the sovereign citizen movement. They're responsible. If they had a social compact, okay, they are responsible for the abuse of that liberty. And this is an abuse of that liberty right here. For writing things, it's an abuse. They're abusing people. For what? Have no idea. Why? Because people are fighting back because they're being forced into an association that they're not even a part of, that hasn't seen fit to write a social compact, to make general rules for everyone in the country that everybody understands, and doesn't make 20,000 laws because they're popular. oh, we got to fix this, we got to fix that, and we got to do this, and we got to do that. Well, you wouldn't have to do it or fix it if you already had a social compact that everybody was agreed upon. You wouldn't have to fix anything because it's already written and already done. See, we don't have to write 50,000 laws and acts in order for people to govern themselves accordingly. They have all signed a social compact and they know what's in it. And these are residents and American nationals. We had a social compact way before 2010, way before the Articles of Confederation. So what we're saying here is this: for people would know if they had a social compact that these acts that they're doing, we're going to take your guns, we're going to do this, we're going to do that because you're just dangerous people. We don't want you to have guns because we want to come in and take you over and all this other stuff. If it was in violation of social compact, you could actually sue for in violation of social compact. But you really don't have that because none of the statutes abide by anything because there's no social compact that created it. In order for a statute to be valid, you have to have a social compact that created the Constitution in the state in the first place. Then the statute would have standing because everybody there would be subject to it because they're a part of the social compact. Right now, you're just trafficking in persons. But you know what? You have all the guns and you have nukes and all that stuff, so it's okay. Yeah, you go ahead and do that. Just keep violating the law, and watch your country being torn apart, like everybody's doing now. We're just sitting here drinking Coke, eating popcorn, just watching the country tear itself to pieces because you don't have a social compact. And you can't figure out why. It's because you never read the Law of Nations. You never read the Law of the Land. And so you have people that are so-called in charge, not qualified to be in charge because they've never read it. The Law of the Land. Professors don't even read it. Go ask them. Have you ever read the Law of Nations? What's that? So you have a country full of people that don't know the law of their own country. And they're too arrogant and too vain to admit it. And there's your problem. They won't humble themselves to say, okay, yeah, we messed up. Yeah, we're screwed up. We don't know shit. We've never read the book. But you're a scholar. And then you have people like Fogbo going after people they're just so freaking confused. And you can calm them down very easily by simply, because you're scaring the crap out of them. Because they don't know how to, and we've seen this 100 times, John, okay? They don't know how to express themselves. They don't really know what's wrong. Okay? We'll show you something here in a minute. This one more thing, okay? All right, we're going to reference this. You've got an Alien Tort Claim Act. It says a district court shall have original jurisdiction in any civil action by an alien for a tort only committed in violation of what? Oh, geez, the law of nations. So wouldn't you say that if you were never offered a social compact, that would be an alien tort claim? If you were in violation of that you were never given a social compact, and therefore, if somebody's trying to subject you to something, that would be a forced association. Wouldn't you say that, John?
Yes, I would. Very definite. It's right there in black and white.
There's another one here says the same thing. Then guess what they did, John? You're going to think this is hilarious, by the way. Here's another one on Britannica. They changed it to tort in violation of international law or a U.S. treaty. They're trying to change it.
Law of nations is international law.
I know, but I'm just saying they're trying to they're trying to get everybody away from the law of nations.
Yep.
Right, law of nations there, law of nations there. Now, if the law of nations had no standing and the Constitution was an actual the law, supreme law of the land, why would they have anything that said that it committed a violation of the law of nations or the treaty or a treaty of the United States? This was in 1948, by the way, and this actually goes all the way back to 1789. Somebody knew something about the law of nations. But if you go to the 1790, their 1790 Naturalization Act, white males only in good standing is not a social compact. And they tried to change it. See, they tried to go all the way up. And then they put it in the 14th Amendment where, and the subject to the jurisdiction thereof, there was no social compact and no oath. That's what makes you subject to it. And it's right there in the law of nations. And so 90% of the problems in this country is simple ignorance. People didn't know. They never heard of it before. And if you don't know, your country is going to fall apart. And it is falling apart. Because no one is ever going to fix that. So therefore, in order for the United States to exist, it had and always was formed into a company. And that, folks, is why they never offered a social compact. Because it always was a company. Privately owned company, and it was never a country. They have, whoever owns the company has what do you call that? Has committed the greatest fraud against the rest of the world that the world has ever seen. If in the Naturalization Act there is no such thing in that process as a social compact agreement, there is no Naturalization Act. None of it exists. It's illegal. It's against the law of nations, the law of the land, the law that creates the state in the first place. And this is what we're trying to tell people over and over and over again. So the communists are all upset and the international bankers are all upset. So they're really pushing this sovereign citizen thing. There's a sovereign citizens. Domestic terrorists, kill them, shoot them. And the cops are scared to death of people. And they go off and they're basically been turned into political assassins. For who? For some guy who turned the United States into, who inherited the United States and where his forefathers converted it into a company and never required a social compact for its creation. That means it always was a company. Go read the original 1790 Naturalization Acts and go all the way up. They never talk about a social compact. Ever, anywhere. And that is clearly in the law of nations. And you've seen that the company does know that the law of nations exists and never bring it up.
Didn't George Washington have a copy in his possession?
Yes, he did. I think he what do you call it? Didn't he check the book out and never returned it?
Checked it out of the library and never returned it, so no one else could find it and read it and know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it that same company perpetrating the same fraud worldwide?
Worldwide. How do you think that it became legal for the Pope to bring his army in Islam into the European nations? It's because they didn't have any social compacts that form the state. You realize even in a monarchy, a social compact is what creates the monarchy? I don't know if anybody knows that or not, because they've never read the law of nations. That's what creates the throne in the first place, is the social compact that allows that throne to be created. It creates a state, it creates everything. But if you don't have that social compact, and they alluded to it in the Declaration of Independence, that they did have a social compact, but they never published it. when they created the Articles of Confederation in all the states. They were done correctly. But somewhere along the way, that old Rusky Illuminati came in and they got rid of that social compact and they caused confusion. Wars upon wars, many, many wars, many murders and assassinations and killings and slavery and all this stuff. When what fixes it is the social compact. It brings your country back to honor. And this is what we're doing here. So now that you know that history, what are you going to do about it? In order to sign a social compact here, you have to do a resident declaration. You can go over to generalpostoffice.international and do a resident declaration and start fixing the country. When you're a part of that social compact, anybody else that tries to, what? Oh, traffic your person over to them, that's called forced association, and that's called slavery. Until that other side wakes up, pops their head out of their ass, and starts listening, and quit letting that badge go to your head, and realize you're wrong. You just have to admit it. You're wrong. You're wrong in everything you do. You were trained that way. Every lawyer in this country is wrong. Every judge, wrong. Every police officer, wrong. You don't have a social compact with people. You don't have shit. You have to read the Law of Nations. Yeah, it's 800 and something pages. Sometimes I think there's some that are 1,200. Oh, too bad. You got to sit down and read 1,200 pages to save your country. Holy crap. I know, you just got to do it between basketball games or football games, when you get a chance. That's good toilet reading. When you're sitting on the toilet, what else are you doing? Read the book and save your country. We've already got it all set up here, but if you want to go off and do it on your own, whatever, doesn't matter.
Didn't the government of the United States of America in 1781, our government, didn't it adopt the Law of Nations?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That means we have to abide by them, doesn't it?
This government of the United States of America is subject to the Law of Nations. There's an actual declaration of it.
Exactly.
It's subject to the Law of Nations. And if you're subject to the Law of Nations, guess what? The Law of Nations is the law of the land. Everybody has a social compact. And the general postmasters do. They have a social compact, so they're subject to the Law of Nations. And whatever act they pass, they're subject to that act. Nobody, they're not going to come back and go, you don't have jurisdiction. None of them's going to say that. We don't have those issues. Have you heard one general postmaster, John, say, you don't have jurisdiction?
Not yet.
Not one of them.
Not yet.
In every office is just as subject to every, it's all equal. We're subject to the social compact that created all of it. So if if the United States wants to survive, because it's all being torn apart, and it will be torn apart, worse than it is now. I mean, they're legislating binary gender things. They're talking about gender. I'm sorry, that's just so stupid.
Half of the people up there can't agree with what the other half are talking about.
I know. They're all going back and forth, yelling, screaming. They're trying to bring illegal aliens in to get votes. They're tearing it apart.
Votes that don't count.
Uh-huh. Because there's no social compact that created it in the first place.
Yep.
That's, folks, is why it is a company. That's why. No other reason. Because the social compact didn't create it. There you go. So, all you guys that are making fun of people, you're just as stupid. Just point those fingers back at yourself because you didn't know either. So don't sit there and say, oh, look at these guys. They think they're this and they think they're that. Don't let that power of the company go to your head, because that company will turn on your ass in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat, they'll turn on you. So you're sitting there all huffy and puffy, and you're all that, and but you're not even following the law of the land. Well, they need to go by the statutes. There is no statute, because there's no social compact that created the state and all that crap. You don't have a permanent population. No such thing. And we can go to any court in the world and give this presentation to them, and every one of them that know the law of nations will know that we're right. Every one of them. But first, we got to have a court in this world somewhere, besides the Human Rights Tribunal and the General Postmaster Council here, that has read the law of nations, so that they're qualified to hear the case.
As far as I know, right now, there's not a court of that caliber in the world.
No.
Anywhere.
The only government that's actually was put together correctly that we know of right now is this government here, the government of the United States of America. It was put together according to the law of the land. So when you have people coming in doing resident declarations, trying to do their American national status, and you say, oh, that's not recognized. We don't recognize that. Let me show you something else. This will be the last thing I show you tonight. Okay? Article 13, I'm going to show you where this came from. A political existence of a state is independent of recognition by other states. Even before being recognized, the state has the right to defend its integrity and independence, to provide for its preservation and prosperity, and consequently to organize itself as it sees fit, to legislate concerning its interests, to administer its services, and to determine the jurisdiction and competence of its courts. The exercise of these rights is limited only by the exercise of the rights of other states in accordance with international law. That would be the law of nations, by the way. Okay, this is the Organization of American States. A lot of people have never even heard of it before. OAS, Charter of the Organization of American States. This was formed a long time ago. It was done, I guess, back in the 40s and 50s. And this was created. They're actually in Washington, D.C., and there's signatories and ratifications to it. Okay, just because they're here, they actually, that's that quote I just showed you is from the Law of Nations. A state and government can exist without your recognition. We don't need it, especially if you don't have a social compact and you don't qualify to recognize it. Y'all get it now? The people that are saying, "Oh, we don't recognize that," you're not qualified to recognize. You don't have a social compact yourself. You don't have an oath. You think you're a citizen. You're not. Born in a certain area doesn't make you a citizen. You have to have a social compact to be subjected to it, and subject yourself to it, and you have to do it voluntarily. And you didn't do that. So your oath isn't worth a piss. That's why we never ask any federal agent, do you have an oath of office, or a judge or anything? It wouldn't mean anything anyways, because we know they don't have social compacts. When we're asking them to make decisions, we're basically just finding out how they think and what they do. We're not taking them serious. So when you don't have squat, you can't walk around like you do. You put on a good show, though. I can tell you that. Put on a good show. Like you do have that authority. But everything that you believe is real is based on a lie. And we have proven that in the 121st broadcast of the T-Roh Show. Everything you believe that is real in this country is a lie. It's all based on a lie. Give you one more example, then we're going to go ahead and end this show. Did everybody know that if you have a social compact and then you take an oath of office, does everybody know that one who took the oath of office is supposed to also sign a letter of acceptance and acknowledgement of that office to take on the responsibilities and liabilities of it? You can take an oath to it. It doesn't mean that you've accepted it. But you don't do that that's not there either. Doesn't exist. We've talked about that before. Just thought it'd be a good time to bring it up again to remind people. Get your head out. Everyone's going to start killing each other for no reason whatsoever. You got a third party in there. Somebody up there in Manhattan Island knows what they're doing, knows what's going on, and they're causing the conflict on purpose. And they don't want anyone to be a part of whatever their United States is, other than them and who they pick, hand pick to be a part of that. The rest of y'all are in the infield. You ain't on Millionaires Row. You're on the infield, which means you're down with the dogs. That's the way it works. Anything else we need to talk about, John, before we go?
Not that I know of, Keith. That covered it pretty good.
Thanks for listening to the 121st broadcast of the T-Roh Show. We will see you next week.